Alrighty, welcome back. Now that we're done with our styling, we can switch our focus to the REST API for our quotes. So the one I'm going to be showing you is Forismatic. I'm going to provide the link in the course. I like using this one because you don't need to sign up and you don't need an API key. You can just use it. So you can see we're going to start with the URL for our API. I'm going to copy that. And we're going to need to add a couple query strings as well. We're going to need to add a method getQuote, format JSON, and language English as well. Okay, so let's jump back into the code in our very empty JavaScript. And we're going to accomplish this using an asynchronous fetch function. Okay, so to start with, we're just going to comment out a title, get quote from API. It's very good to comment your JavaScript, especially each function at least, just to make it easier for other people that you might be working with to understand your code. So to create an asynchronous function, we're going to write out async function, and then we're going to name it get quote, bracket, and then our curly bracket, press enter. And before we actually write this out, we want this function to run when we load our page. So we're going to comment out at the very bottom, get quote. We want this to be at the bottom because you always want the function to be declared before you call it. Okay, so let's get back to writing the function now. We're going to start by having a const for our API URL equals single quotes, and then we're going to paste in our URL that we copied, and question mark to add our query string, method equals get quote with a capital Q, and lang equals en for English, and our format equals JSON. Okay, so you can see again, we would benefit from word wrap here, so I'm going to use Alt-Z to word wrap that for now. We're going to put a semicolon to show that that line is finished. And below this, we're going to set up a try-catch statement. So in our try statement, we'll build our catch first. So the catch is designed for errors. So we're going to pass in this parameter error in our parentheses, and we're going to console log. So this will allow us to see this message in our console. And we're going to add a string, whoops, no quote, plus we're going to pass in our error message by having a comma and then passing in the error that we stated up here. We're going to add a semicolon to that. Okay, so now our try statement. Within this is going to be the magic of the async function. So we're going to start by setting the response as a constant, and that's going to equal awaiting the fetch request to complete from our API URL above. And then after that, we're going to have a const for our data, and that is going to await the response that we set above in JSON format. And lastly, we're just going to console log our data. So just a very brief explanation of this. Because we have an asynchronous function, this constant is not going to be set until this finishes fetching. This data will not be set until it finishes returning this response in JSON format. Okay. So let's save that and actually see how it works in the browser. Alrighty, we're going to open up our inspect here, and we're going to go over to the console, and we can see that we have an error. So, as I was explaining, the fetch request that we're using uses a CORS policy. That means that by default, if you are calling an API from a different origin, so in our case, our local host is trying to call api.forismatic, by default, that will just not work. It's been blocked. So when you're using free APIs, this might happen because this API might not be properly configured to send CORS headers, which would allow this to work on most APIs. There is a solution to get around this that I've implemented that I've learned from researching online. I will provide an article that talks more about this, but basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be calling a proxy API first, and then we're going to call our quote API after. So let's jump back into the code and I'll show you how that's done. So we're going to start with adding a constant for a proxy URL, and we're going to pass in our proxy URL. So https and cors-anywhere.herokuapp.com/. So this is an option that has been set up for everybody to use, but in an optional video, I'll show you how to actually make your own, because sometimes this one might be down and it's more reliable for you to just have your own version of it. It'll only take a few minutes to set up, so feel free to check that out. Down here in our fetch request now, we're going to combine these two URLs together. So we're essentially going to make our API call using our headers from our proxy call. So we're going to save that and check it out. All right, awesome. So not only are we not seeing an error, we're actually returning a quote from our quote API. Awesome. So we got it working. We have our quote text here and we have our quote author here. If we refresh the page, it might take a few seconds to load, but you can see here we actually have an error. Whoops. There's a syntax error. There's an unexpected token in JSON at position 18. So this is another error that is specific to this API. I think it's because of special characters that they might be using on some of the quotes. So we're actually going to need to add one more thing into our catch statement. So instead of just console logging this error, we actually want to get a new quote if we hit an error. So we're just going to add get quote along with our catch. So we can save that and go back. And we can see we have a quote here. Let's refresh it. Okay, that works. So you can see that we have 3 in a row that had an unexpected token, but then eventually it pulled up another quote. All right, perfect. So that's pretty much all we need to do on the API side. In the next video, we're actually going to start populating our quote and author dynamically with this data. All right, I'll see you in that one. Bye for now.